Bach is viewed as like one of the most important figures in modern music. But Bach was a nobody. He was so much of a nobody in his day that there are hundreds of pieces he's written that we lost because when he died, they sold it for the paper. Because Bach's music was more valuable as wrapping paper for butchers than it was as music. Dylan, to be fair, I find Mozart's work to be very unemotional, more mathematically stimulating. Interesting that you would say that about Mozart. So, a couple things, because Mozart, okay, this is the music nerd. Mozart, being part of the classical period, was moving away from that very highly aristocratic, very highly intellectualized style of the Baroque period. A lot of people don't realize now because there's so much time separating us, but the classical period was very much inspired by the Enlightenment movement about the humanitarianism, that the average human being has value for just being a human being. And so music went away from being an aristocratic art that appealed only to the wealthy, only to the educated, and started moving much, 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 much more towards the average man, the new emerging middle class. And so you can see that a lot in Mozart's music. When you compare Mozart's opera seria to, or like the serious operas, from the serious operas of the Baroque period, the Baroque period was very extravagant. Lots of what they called coloratura, lots of like trills, lots of like moving all over the place, trying to show off how skilled the singer is. Whereas the classical period very much streamlined everything and said, no, we want to focus on memorable melodies. We want to focus on music that can be understood by the audience the first time they heard it. All right. And then, of course, so the idea that like describing Mozart as being very mathematical, I would say that's just because you lack, like, not, this isn't a dig. I'm just saying, like, you lack context. Like, this is for anyone. Anytime anyone hears a new piece of music, you lack context for that song. Have you ever had a song that you listened to, you didn't like it, and then later down the line, you ended up really, really, really enjoying it? That's because the first time you listened to it, you lacked context. You lacked any emotional responses other than just that initial response. You hadn't heard it before, so you couldn't really follow it. You couldn't understand it. But once you've heard a piece of music a couple times and you can understand how each piece fits in. So like when you hear the intro to a song, you're like, ugh, don't like that. But then later on, you really enjoy the hook. And then after you've heard the intro a couple times, it just kind of grows on you. That's because you're getting more context. You're hearing it more and more times. You're being exposed to it more times. You're having more emotional responses, and you're able to actually form a more informed opinion about that music. Not saying that your initial opinion was wrong. I'm just saying that you haven't exposed yourself. So, like, yeah, Mozart very oftentimes gets, like, lots of classical music gets pushed off as being this fancy music. Music that you go to an opera hall and you listen to Don Giovanni. Or you go to the symphony hall and you listen to one of Mozart's symphonies. It's a very fancy thing, a very high class kind of experience. But what you'll find is the people who tend to love classical music the most are the people who invite it into their lives. People who listen to Mozart while they clean. People who listen to Beethoven while they go for their jogs or walk with their dog. People who have more emotional experiences and stimuli associated with that highbrow music, right? Because the music did not start off as highbrow. Mozart started off as music for the common man, as the pop music of his day. That's why so many times, like, for example, like Classic FM, their Instagram page and their social media page, the comments are so insidious. They're filled with so many haters. They can't make a post without the vast majority of comments just talking about how that post is stupid and the people that it's about are stupid. Because pop music, it's different. Every composer, pretty much every composer that we put on a pedestal these days was lambasted at some point. There is a book called the Lexicon of Musical Invectives. And it's basically just a collection of all of the worst reviews of all the best composers. So critics saying that Beethoven has no future in music. Critics saying that Debussy is just a fad and will be forgotten in a week. People saying that Stravinsky should be killed for writing Rite of Spring because it's just such a stupid piece of music. All of these composers, who, whether you know their name or not, have gone on to shape modern music. We would not have any of the film composers we have today. We would not have any of the classical composers we would today without those who came before. And so the people who claim that like modern music or modern composers just aren't that good or that music's not for them, it's like, fine, that's your opinion, but your opinion is objectively false. I know that sounds a little strong, but if we look at history, I would say chances are your opinion is objectively false as much as an opinion can be objectively false. Because there hasn't been a single new wave of music that wasn't strongly opposed by the public. We have no idea of knowing what the most influential music of today is. We have no idea of knowing. It might be Taylor Swift. However, it could also be someone we have no idea who it is. The most popular and lucrative composers of the Baroque period have been forgotten. We know of them because we know of like tales of their ticket sales and how popular they were. We know how far-reaching their operas were, but we don't know the music because it was super popular, super super popular, super what's the term I'm looking for? No, just makes lots of money in its time, but it didn't influence future composers. Contrary, we have composers like Bach who were nobody. Bach is viewed as like one of the most important figures in modern like music. Bach is the reason why so much of our understanding of harmony exists. Like the biggest, like a functional harmony, the idea of chords largely come from Bach. But Bach was a nobody. He was so much of a nobody in his day that there are hundreds of pieces he's written that we lost because when he died, they sold it for the paper. Because Bach's music was more valuable as wrapping paper for butchers than it was as music. And so much of his music that we have now is preserved only because he wrote it and sent it as a job application, and it got hidden away by some bureaucrat in a file system that lasted hundreds of years, and then some musicologist somewhere was like, oh, I found evidence that Bach sent something here, let's go look through it, and like, oh my goodness, we found it, wonderful, yay, kind of stuff. But so many composers, like we have no way of knowing who's going to influence the next generation. It could be Hans Zimmer. It could be John Williams. It could be someone that's going to die that soon, that we'll never know them while they're alive. But 50 years from now, someone discovers their music and goes, this is awesome. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to take this for myself. I'm going to do my whole thing. And yeah, we have no way of knowing. How did I get on this rant? All right, I'm on this rant. I have no idea what started it. Oh, it was Dylan. Dylan made a comment about Mozart being mathematically stimulating and not inherently emotional. But so yeah, in fairness, going back to that, music as a method for self-expression wasn't an idea in the classical period. So the idea that music is a form of self-expression, that the composer can tell their own story, that the composer can have an idea of what emotions and what ideas they want their music to portray, that didn't come around until the Romantic period. Like Beethoven, Hector Berlioz, those Romantic era composers. That's kind of what defines that genre. The difference between the Baroque period was very much about like establishing a lot of the modern music theory we have in terms of like, it was clarity. Like Baroque period was very much about, well, it comes back to the term Baroque. Baroque being very like extravagant. Baroque is actually a bit, at the time, was a vulgar term. It was like an insult to the music. Again, showing how like music is rarely appreciated fully in its own time. The term Baroque was used as a vulgar term to describe something that was over the top, unnecessarily frilly, unnecessarily extravagant. And so it's described as the Baroque period because the music was very extravagant. The architecture was very extravagant. Everything was extravagant and incredibly detailed. Then the classical period came around and the focus became about clarity of design. No longer showing off how clever the composer is, although that was still important, but more about writing music that the average person could enjoy. Then the Romantic period came about, and it was like, all right, screw tradition, screw the old forms, screw proper music. I'm going to write music that I want to write. I'm going to write music that portrays a story. I'm going to write music to express my emotions, not whatever this aristocrat who paid me to do it is for. This is my music, and I'm going to do what I want with it. That was the Romantic period. Then the Impressionistic period was very much exploring timbre and other things. So like Claude Debussy, one of the de facto Impressionistic composers, was all about elevating timbre, elevating sound for sound's sake, instrument choice for instrument choice, elevating that to the point of melody and rhythm. So the idea that a melody can be a theme, yeah, we know that. A rhythm can be a theme, but Claude Debussy established that timbre can be a theme. You can have a flute come in with an oboe and play a really pretty thing that doesn't really make sense because it's atonal, but the sound of it is so beautiful and so lush and so new that it becomes its own thing. That timbre became elevated to the point where the instrument choice and the colors you use in the orchestra became just as important as melody and just as important as rhythm. An idea that persists to this day. It's no longer which instrument can just play this part and just like, all right, the clarinet's playing that part. It becomes, all right, which instrument is the best, most expressive voice for this melody kind of thing. Then after the Impressionistic era came the Modernist era, which a lot of people hate. That's like Schoenberg and like the atonal stuff. In fairness, that all ended around the 80s. All right, modern composers don't really do that as much. But yeah, we have no idea of knowing what the most de facto definitive description of our era is until we're kind of all gone and past. Until the next wave comes and they tell us what they learned from us. Until the next generation gets old enough to say what they learned, what they liked, what they took inspiration from. And so this is kind of like the tragedy of composers who have long lives is you can start on the cutting edge, but by the time you die, you're basically going to be considered like a conservative musician, someone who sticks to the old ways. I'm trying to think, was it Camille Saint-Saëns who had that happen where he was like a very cutting edge romantic era composer, but he lived to be a composer for like 80 years. And so by the time he died, he was viewed as like this conservative old hat composer who never adapted kind of thing, which is just, again, kind of like the tragic kind of things. Wow, I'm kind of ranting right now. Hopefully you guys are learning some stuff. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Let's see here. Monef, welcome. Sean, Tolstoy literally wrote an entire essay called Why I Hate Mozart. He also hated Beethoven, literally thinking of their work as shallow trash with no depth of emotion. Exactly. Yes, so every generation changes. Yeah, so many people hated Mozart in the aftermath because, again, when this one composer from history gets put on a pedestal and everyone's like, well, we're going to do this because that's how he did it. Or this is how we're going to do it because that's how she did it. Or this is how this composer did it or whatever. Like, these are the lessons we learned and must be preserved. This is the proper way to do it. When you're constantly told Mozart and Beethoven are the models to follow, that does invite resentment. We're like, no, that's not what I want to do. That's not what I want to compose. I want to do something different. And when you're told, no, different is wrong, which so many composers have done, I don't think there's a modern composer who hasn't been told that their way of writing is wrong. I have been told so many times that my love for melodies and like cool harmonies, it works against me because it's not cutting edge. It's not what I'm supposed to be doing to show I'm pushing the boundaries. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not trying to impress a bunch of academics. I'm not trying to be praised for my intellectual capabilities. I just like writing music. I like telling stories, and I like to combine the two. All right? So, yeah, lots of people hate the old masters because they view them as obstacles, as mountains to be overdone or possibly taken down. Sean, it is always weird to remember that Salieri was way more successful than Mozart in his day. True. Amadeus retcons history to suit Mozart's paranoia, but instead it was the other way around. Yes, Amadeus is not accurate at all. Salieri and Mozart were actually decent friends. Salieri was definitely, I believe, friends with Haydn, who was also a dear friend with Mozart. Sean, it's always weird to remember that Stravinsky and Holst were considered avant-garde. Yes! Yes, people who are now like the music that we have nowadays, that we feel like, oh, that's old music, that's classical music. It almost always started off as new and cutting edge. Mozart was new and cutting edge. Again, everybody has that chance to come up and be new, and it depends on who. Literally, it's just who influences the next generation. That's what determines what great music is who lives on, who influences the next generation. Awesome. I think I'm all caught up. So it has been like an hour and a half. So we didn't really get around to writing a bunch of music. My apologies. That is because, again, my computer has an OS and it's still getting set up, so we're just chatting. But yeah. So thank you, everyone who stopped by. Don't forget to like the stream. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to move on because I'm getting quite warm. I hope you enjoyed the stream. All right, so I'll see you all next week. Next week's not the last stream of the month, is it? Let's double check. All right, so I can't click on that one. I got on my other screen. My calendar's not popping up. Let's see here. Here we go. No, yeah, it's not next week. So in 2 weeks, we'll be doing the live feedback stream. But next week I'm going to be live, and I'm going to be exploring a new plugin I was sent that I am very, very excited about. So until next time, my friends, thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I certainly did. And I'll see you in the next video. All right. Bye-bye.